This method is used by Elon Musk, Jack Dorsey, the former CEO of Twitter, and Phil Libet, the founder of Evernote, to help them perform at their best level. The method is called intermittent fasting, and you've probably heard of it before. But why and how does that method help them improve their performance and output? My name is Jonas, and I help entrepreneurs achieve top-level performance and health with my scientific health system. And in today's video, I'm going to explain to you how intermittent fasting can improve your output and performance, how I incorporated it into my life, and how you can too. Let's dive into it. First of all, I want to elaborate the reasons why it is impactful. And for this, I have distilled 7 major points. So let's get into them. First of all, intermittent fasting helps you improve your mental clarity and focus. How? When you fast, the body switches the way energy is being supplied. We have 2 different energy stores. The first one is glycogen, and the second one is fat. Now, when you fast, obviously the glycogen gets used up, and so your body is forced to take more energy from the fat, so he metabolizes that fat, which leads to an increased production of ketones. Ketone bodies are bodies which are being produced when we metabolize fat from our storage. One part of those ketone bodies is called beta-hydroxybutyrate, short BHB. And this BHB leads to increased neurotropic effects. So this should be a brain, you can see here, very well drawn, and which leads to an increase in and improvement in mitochondrial function and leads to an overall better brain function. To further visualize this or drive this point home, a study has been conducted where they induced BHB in microdoses into the brain, and they have seen that when they did so, that the brain activity increased by almost 80%. So you can imagine what ketone bodies and especially BHB can do to your brain. Also, increased BHB leads to an impaired apoptose. What's this? Apoptose describes the process of the natural death of our cells. And if this apoptose is being impaired, this means our cells, especially also in our brain, live longer, which leaves us with better brain functioning. Also, due to the intermittent fasting, we have greater BDNF levels. What is BDNF? This stands for brain derived neurotropic factor. Neuro stands for, or means brain in this case, and tropic means growth. So if we have higher BDNF levels, this means that we have better memory, better attention and learning, and better brain health, as well as plasticity, which allows us to bring more focus and energy to our task at hand. Second point, how intermittent fasting can improve our performance and output, is that we have increased productivity. Why? Let's say you fast in the morning. This means you skip your breakfast, leaving you with 30 minutes up to 60 minutes, which you don't have to use for eating, but you can use for work. Also, you lose or you gain the cost of task switching. What is task switching? If you switch tasks, it takes you mentally longer to get back to the task at hand. and it can cost you up to 40% of the time you have allocated or you want to invest in a given task. This is shown by the American Psychological Association. Let me illustrate this with a detail. Let's say you have a work block of a total of 90 minutes. Now, when you switch tasks in the middle, you don't just lose, let's say, those 20 minutes that task in the middle took you, you also lose the time where you have to redirect yourself mentally to the task. And studies have shown that it can take up to 23 minutes to mentally redirect yourself. So, let's say at this point you have about 45 minutes left for your given task block. If you have to mentally redirect yourself for about 23 minutes, this costs you more than 50% of your time. So this is just to illustrate how you can save time and even gain time by not eating breakfast and just straight up use the time you have to work. The third point is that you have increased and stable energy levels. Lots of entrepreneurs report that they have increased and stable energy levels when they do or practice intermittent fasting. But why is that? Well, there are two main reasons. The first reason, which I elaborated on earlier in the video, is that we have a different usage of energy sources. Let's just draw a battery here, or like this. And we have reduced inflammation levels in our body. Let's dive into the energy sources first. So, as I said earlier, we have glycogen and fat the body uses. Now, if our body metabolizes fat to gain energy, there are two main benefits we have from this. The first benefit is that we have stable energy sources. Why? Well, there isn't a lot of insulin involved in the process of gaining energy through fat, as much as it would be with glycogen. Because if we, for example, eat something, our insulin levels rise and then fall again, which leads to a fluctuation in energy which is being supplied. But when we use fat or metabolize fat as an energy source, we don't have that fluctuation, and therefore having a nice, stable energy level which we can depend on. Also, when we don't eat, we don't have to use thermal energy to digest our food. Thermal energy is the energy which is being used to digest the food and takes up to 10% of our basal metabolic rate. BMR. That describes like the amount of energy you need when you just lie in your bed all day. 10% of that energy is being used to digest food. So we save those 10% as well. The second reason, decreased inflammation levels. Once a study was conducted where they looked at people who did intermittent fasting, and they also had a control group alongside the intermittent fasting group, and they wanted to see how inflammation levels were affected by intermittent fasting. And they observed the pro-inflammatory cytokines, interleukin-1 beta and TNF alpha. And they saw that interleukin-1 beta decreased up to 40% and TNF alpha up to 35%. Okay, what does that mean? Interleukins and TNF-alpha are parts of our immune system and markers whereby which we can detect how active our immune system is and how inflamed we are inside of our body. And therefore, you can see here that inflammation levels can be reduced by up to 40% in our body just by practicing intermittent fasting. And when we are less inflamed in our body doesn't have to fight the inflammation and can redirect this energy into other areas and is more free. So therefore, you can consciously determine where you want to put this extra amount of energy. And the fourth point is just long-term health, which leads to a long-term better output. Why is that? Intermittent fasting improves our metabolism, reduces our inflammation, helps us with insulin sensitivity, and also helps us control our weight and leads to better weight management. And therefore, if we take advantage of those benefits, we will be healthier in the long term. Also, intermittent fasting leads to an internal process called autophagy. What is this? Autophagy, let me explain this. Autophagy in this sense means self or autonom, and phagy means eating. So this process describes the body eating itself, and in that case he eats up his own cells, and in particular the cells he doesn't use anymore, or the cells who are too old, don't serve the ecosystem of the body and therefore can't be used and just use up energy without giving energy. And autophagy just helps with the cell renewal, which is also very healthy and good for our long-term health. Then we have our fifth point, which is enhanced decision making. Why does intermittent fasting help with decision making? Well, it reduces brain fog, we have more mental clarity, less insulin crashes, and you increase your ability to make good decisions just by the compounding effect of those benefits I just mentioned. And why is that important? Warren Buffett always mentions that he just tries to keep his mind clear. Why? Because he wants to make good decisions. Why? Because decisions are very important when you watch at the long term or look at the long-term development of the business itself. Therefore, those benefits of intermittent fasting, which leads to better and enhanced decision making, are very impactful. So let's draw it like this. Check. Then you have more mental bandwidth when you do intermittent fasting. Let me explain. Through the routine and the 0 distractions, you can focus just more on the task at hand. It also goes hand in hand with the point I mentioned earlier, that you don't have the cost of task switching and mental redirection. So you just really can go and come into the flow and get more done. You have a simplified eating pattern because you don't have to eat breakfast. And also because we don't have the effect of thermal energy, which is being used for digestion, we have more energy to use for cognitive performance, which also increases our mental bandwidth and helps us to just channel 100% of our focus into our work. And the last point I want to leave you with is just enhanced and better discipline and control. If you practice intermittent fasting and you stick to the protocol, it will teach you discipline and control. Because during the prolonged fasting period, sometimes you will experience craving, you will be hungry sometimes, and you will want to eat sometimes. And if you just train yourself to not eat and stick to the protocol, then this skill will transform in other areas of your life and can be very well used when running a company, building your business, improving your output and performance. So, yeah, just discipline and control. Okay, now we've covered all the points why intermittent fasting is beneficial for you as an entrepreneur, and now it comes down to how do we actually apply intermittent fasting into our life. Well, I've used 4 steps to implement intermittent fasting into my daily life, and I'm going to explain them to you so that you can do that too. First of all, we want to determine our fasting window. What does that mean? It should be window. What does that mean? There are multiple different fasting methods and time restrictions. What helped me is to just take the one that fits my lifestyle and circumstances the best and then just apply it. So in my case, I fast from 8 p.m. to 12 p.m. or midday of the following day. And this really fits into my lifestyle because I don't need to eat breakfast. I want to eat lunch and dinner, and therefore that's perfectly well for me. Let's say you want to really eat breakfast, that's also fine. You can eat breakfast, eat lunch, and then just skip dinner, and then you also practice intermittent fasting, but you don't have to cut out your breakfast if you really love it, or if you go brunching a lot of the time, I don't know. But you can adapt it to your lifestyle and how you want to live your life. So the second point is how you can adjust your eating pattern. There are 2 ways you can do it. And the first way is that you just jump directly into the protocol. You fast for 16 hours and you eat for 8 hours. That's what I personally did. But you can also, if you want to, not jump directly into it, but do it gradually. Just delay breakfast. Start at 9 a.m., then 10 a.m., then 11 a.m., and just gradually delay the time you eat breakfast until you get to noon. And then you can just skip breakfast and go directly into eating lunch. And those are the 2 options. As I said previously, I prefer the first one. But if you can also choose the second one. Then the third point, which is very important, is that you stay hydrated. Why do I say this? It seems obvious, but in some cases it isn't. Why? When we eat breakfast, we're just used to also drinking a glass of water besides it. So when we skip breakfast, we have to pay attention that we don't also skip the hydration part. So what I do first things first is I drink 2 glasses of water with some salt in it and some lemon juice. You now may ask yourself, okay, why salt? Salt has a lot of electrolytes in it and helps your brain to function better. And also lemon juice for the taste and for the vitamin C. Fourth point, listen. To what, you may ask? To your body. If you experience dizziness, first of all, drink more, maybe eat something in some occasions, but it can happen that your body really tells you to eat something in some occasions, and then it's fine to do so. You don't have to just strictly adhere to the protocol. and stress your body too much. Give him also time to adapt. All right, so now we come to the potential downsides. And there also we have 4 major points. First point being cognitive impairment during transition. Why is that? As I mentioned earlier, your body during the fasted state switches from using glycogen stores for energy production to mainly metabolizing fat, which is a big shift and takes a while for your body to adapt. So just give your body time and beware that you may experience cognitive impairment during the transition period. Second point, energy levels. Let's draw a good old battery here. During the transition phase, you may experience strong cravings and an unstable mood, which also then leads further to decreased energy levels and productivity because you experience those cravings, which in the beginning may take you down concerning output, but it's just a sacrifice you have to make if you want to long-term stick to the fasting protocol. Third point is social life and constraints. It can happen that intermittent fasting leads to constraints in the terms or in the domain of social life. And there, as I already said, try to find a fasting schedule which fits mostly or fits your lifestyle the best, and try to implement that one. So that way you have the least amount of sacrifices in your social life and the most amount of gains or potential upsides with your fasting protocol. The fourth point is eating disorders. Not eating for prolonged time can lead to, as I said, big cravings, which leads to, for some people at least, eating huge amounts of food in one go, which is not healthy for your gut, for your digestive system, and for your overall body. So even though you fasted for a long time, try to eat more or less normal amounts of portions or normal portions of food, so that you don't get into maybe binge eating or other types of unhealthy ways of eating. So be aware of that when you, let me drive here a big plate and make this a smaller one. So be aware that you don't indulge into binge eating, and just regulate the amount of food and especially the portions and the size of your portions when you begin with intermittent fasting. All right, so we've talked about the downsides, and now we want to dive into how we can avoid those downsides. So here as well, we have 3 major points. The first one being, as I mentioned earlier, drink enough water. If you drink enough water, you can first of all decrease the intensity of feeling hungry, also hydrate your body properly, and if you again add a little bit of salt and lemon juice, you have the potentials or the benefits of the electrolytes for the brain. You also avoid headache, fatigue, and constipation. And here the recommended dose is 2 to 3 liters per day, which are pretty common. Also, if you want to, for the taste of the water, you can add lemon, cucumber, mint, or ginger. And then, as I said earlier, eating the right amount. When you break the fast, people tend to eat big portions because they are very hungry and finally can eat. But we want to avoid that because it can lead to insulin resistance, indigestion, and also if we eat too much, of course, and obviously, we can gain a lot of weight. So we want to break our fasting period with a light meal, not too many carbs, and avoid insulin spikes by not eating too much carbs. Therefore, we can keep our level of output throughout the afternoon as well. Because what happens if we eat, first of all, too much and too many carbs? First of all, our insulin spikes a lot and then falls down again, leading into a crash, cognitively and physically. And second of all, if we eat a lot, our stomach, let me draw a stomach here. Our stomach it has to digest a lot of food, which leads to a lot of thermal energy which is needed, and thus leading us to having less energy in our brain because our body is just occupied with digesting a lot of food. Also, how can we decrease insulin spikes even more? Studies have shown that if you eat your meals with blueberries, you can decrease your insulin spike and even it out over a longer period of time. So that's a little tip to include or implement into your diet. And also, as I said, the third point, adjust your fasting schedule to your lifestyle. If you want to eat later in the evening, no worries, just start eating later in the afternoon or breaking your fasting period at a later point of time. And if you want to eat earlier or if you want to eat breakfast, you can just, without any concerns, skip dinner. And now, to finish this series off, how can we achieve consistency? Well, this is actually pretty simple. First of all, we want to find our motivation, or as you've probably heard previously, your why. Because if you have this, if you have a clear vision why you are doing it, what your motivation is, you will stick to it for a long period of time. What also can help is, in the beginning, that you use maybe a tracking sheet to keep track of how many days you already did, to see your streak, and by seeing your streak, not wanting to break your streak, which is really helpful. And that's the first part. Then second part is start slow and increase your fasting window. You know that part. So maybe you start with a 10-hour fasting window, then increase it up to 12 hours, and then maybe at the end 16 hours. That's the end goal. Next point is stay flexible and adaptable. Intermittent fasting shouldn't be a rigid approach, and if needed, you can vary your fasting window. I also, for example, just today, I trained in the morning, therefore I ate carbs before the training to prevent my muscles being broken down, because my body would need to have energy for the training. And then I started my eating period already at 8 a.m. and I skipped dinner just to maintain my fasting schedule and my fasting protocol. But as you see, you can vary your fasting period and your eating period and adapt it accordingly. So that's like a little tip you can implement if you have to switch things around. And also, just enjoy the process and results. It sounds simple, but for me, I really like it when I see the upsides it has. I know that when I experience a strong sense of hunger or cravings, I know that this is part of the process, and I know that this leads me to better output and performance. And if I'm aware of that, I can just enjoy the process is a little bit too much, but I'm able to enjoy and see the process better, and it becomes more or less a game for me. And that's also one thing which is very important. Don't try to see it as a rigid, hard, disciplined thing we have to do to just increase our focus and performance, but more of to see it as a way of life and a game, a process which levels us as an individual up and brings us to a next level. Yeah, that's one part that helped me as well. So, to conclude, intermittent fasting is used by successful entrepreneurs, as for example Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey. The benefits are improved mental clarity, increased productivity and energy levels, enhanced decision making, and just more mental bandwidth. And the practical implementations are the 4-step framework I've mentioned, so fasting window, jumping into the protocol or adjusting gradually, drink water and listen to your body. And the long-term perspective is find your why, increase the way you can adapt the best, and see it as a game. So I hope this video helped you to get a good introduction into intermittent fasting, helped you see the benefits of it and how it can help you as an individual level up. And I hope I could give value back with this video. If you are interested in optimizing your health and performance and taking it to the next level with a scientific-based protocol, you can click the link below and we can discuss how I may help you get to the next level, and I hope to see you there. Until then, take care, best luck with integrating the protocol, and stay healthy.